In order to have an actual insurrection of the kind that you want to claim this is, you would need enormous numbers of very well-trained people who are heavily armed with serious plans to go into the Capitol and overthrow the power of the United States government. This is the kind of drama queen behavior that has dominated the Trump years, where every kind of event is catastrophized to its highest extent.
So you would say that any past, so like the Whiskey Rebellion in the United States, that's
Destiny got demolished by Glenn Greenwald. Nothing new, another surprise here, where Destiny gets schooled by Glenn Greenwald about what an insurrection really is. Now, Destiny is making a big deal that it was delayed, where Glenn says that he's only mad about the delay because it was a presidential certification, but federal processes have been delayed before. Now, Destiny says that thousands were there, and Destiny doesn't know where the line that is crossed to make it an insurrection, but it was crossed according to Destiny. And Glenn reads the peacefully protest words that Trump said, and it's a pretty good debate with Destiny and Glenn. And you know, basically it's Destiny who's often getting dragged through the mud and stuff about always being wrong, because, well, that's what Destiny is. So Destiny is always wrong, and here's Destiny being demolished by Glenn Greenwald in a heated debate. If you enjoy what's shared in this video, go ahead and smash the like button, share the video, follow our across social media, subscribe to the channel, click the bell notification, so that way you'll be notified of future uploads and updates. Now, here we go with this debate.
What it was.
I'm going to ask the same question again. When in the history of the United States has the certification of the electoral vote, the peaceful transfer of power from one president to the next, been delayed by protesters or violent protesters?
I'm happy to concede that this is the first time that people went on January 6th.
Then it's historical. Then it's historical.
And interrupted the proceeding.
Yeah, then it's historical, right? By definition, it's a moment in history that is unique.
It wasn't a serious disruption.
They delayed the vote, didn't they?
By 3 hours or by 4 hours.
For the first time in U.S. history. Yes, that's significant. That's serious.
Why is it more significant to delay this proceeding than other congressional proceedings? Things like voting on wars or confirming Supreme Court justices are pretty serious, too, in terms of the things Congress is supposed to do under Article 1. But the reason we don't consider those protests, even though they might have delayed the proceeding some, to be historic or serious or an insurrection, is because they never posed a threat to the stability of the United States government. In order to have an actual insurrection of the kind that you want to claim this is, you would need enormous numbers of very well-trained people who are heavily armed with serious plans to go into the Capitol and overthrow the power of the United States government. This is the kind of drama queen behavior that has dominated the Trump years, where every kind of event is catastrophized to its highest extent.
So you would say that any past, so like the Whiskey Rebellion in the United States, that's stupid. They shouldn't have called it that. They should have called it like the farmer protest or something different, or because what you're saying right now, it stands in contrast to how every other person viewed insurrectionism or insurrectionists at the time when, say, the 14th Amendment was drafted and ratified. People viewed people sometimes as being insurrectionary or giving aid or comfort to enemies of the United States just for letting their children go off to war to serve the Confederacy. It's nice if you, Glenn Greenwald, personally have some view of what you personally think an insurrectionist or rebellion might look like or what it should be, but to be quite frank, your opinion doesn't really matter. The opinion would be the historical relevance of the saying in the United States. It would be the historical analysis that exists for historical rebellions or insurrections in the United States, which oftentimes had very little to no chance of succeeding. Even the insurrectionists themselves thought that they weren't going to succeed. And we would use that analysis that exists at the time when, say, the 14th Amendment was ratified, and then we would use that going forward to figure out what do we think an insurrection and a rebellion is. And again, you can try to minimize and you can try to call it ideological and whatever you want. None of those congressional protests that you mentioned in the past rose to a level where tens of thousands of protesters were violently breaking into Congress and delaying the certification of the presidential vote.
You just got done saying that the maximum number of people who entered the Capitol was 2,000, and now you're calling it tens of thousands of people because you know so well. In fact, you conceded in the very first question I asked you that of course there has to be a quantitative component in terms of the gravity of the threat in order to seriously call it an insurrection or a coup, which is why I began by asking you whether or not if two people armed with knives went to the Congress and demanded that Donald Trump be removed after he was declared the winner and threatened to use violence with their knives, whether that would in the history books or by our major newspapers be referred to as the United States fighting off a coup or an insurrection. And you said, yeah, I mean, I guess if it's just two people, then it would probably be pretty ridiculous to call it that. So I see this, what happened on January 6th, a 3-hour riot that even the FBI's informants on the ground told the FBI in real time was never intended to be any kind of premeditated violent act on the part of most people, but instead was something that happened spontaneously, as so often happens where political protests confront the police and become violent. I see it much more akin to the kind of ridiculous example that I began by asking you, where you conceded that wouldn't be called an insurrection, than I do some kind of Civil War type situation or even a meaningful armed rebellion of the kind that happened in Russia last year, where even that was crushed in 12 hours.
Are you familiar with Loki's wager?
Explain it to me.
So I think Loki makes a wager with two dwarves or whatever, and eventually they say that they can cut his head off. It comes to the point to where he loses the wager. They go to collect their bet, and when they're trying to figure out how to cut his head off, they're arguing over what part of the neck is when the head starts, and then the rest of the neck begins, basically. And the argument he eventually makes is, well, you can't take even a centimeter, an inch of my neck, therefore you're not allowed to cut my head off. You're trying to argue right now that because I might not consider two people an insurrection, that I can't possibly consider 2,000 people an insurrection. That's the same as you saying, since I can't tell precisely where your head ends and your neck begins, I might say that your toe is part of your head. This argument is nonsense, and the only way that you can make the argument is to continue to try to make comparisons to other more extreme coups or more intense insurrectionist attempts, which I agree. There can be more extreme insurrectionist attempts. There can be.
I don't think Glenn Greenwald was making that kind of an argument where he was using two people for the insurrection and stuff. 2 or 2,000. I don't care. Either way, I mean, basically, it wasn't really an insurrection that was brought on by Trump's words and stuff. Trump wasn't the one who actually influenced the people to go ahead and do that. The people themselves decided to go ahead and do it. Otherwise, you know, it would have actually been worse than that. The Capitol would have been on fire. More cops would have been dead, and much more people be arrested. But guess what? I mean, does really matter to Destiny, because the simple fact of the matter is he wants to go ahead and take the conversation other way in places and stuff where he will use other examples in principle only that doesn't really relate to the problem at hand or the debate at hand.
Be more extreme coups, but the reality is, even if you want to wind it all the way back down, say, like, okay, we'll ignore the tens of thousands of protesters outside. We can just go with 2,000 people. Glenn, how are you seriously going to argue that 2,000 people inside the Capitol with the goal of delaying the certification of the vote, which they accomplished, doesn't represent an insurrection?
Glenn, just before you go on, I just want to put you on Glenn's question. So Glenn's question was, he said an insurrection when there's an actual threat to democracy. I'm pushing off that a vote isn't a threat to democracy. At what point did you call it an insurrection? Would you call it an insurrection on January 6th?
I don't know, like, here's the thing. I don't know the thin line that they'd have to cross to call it an insurrection, but whatever line that is, it was crossed a long time ago. You had the President of the United States calling up over 100,000 people to D.C., and then he riled them up, saying that they needed to essentially delay the vote. He was relying on Pence to do it. All of those protesters went to the White House. A lot of them, or not to the White House, sorry, to the Capitol building. A lot of them broke into the Capitol building with the goal of delaying the certification of the vote because they didn't like the outcome of the election and they wanted to change it. They needed to fight like hell to take their country back because Mike Pence wasn't going to do the right thing by helping Trump do his constitutional coup. And so they turned it into an insurrection. It's plenty of what happened. Now, if only 20 people went in, would I consider it an insurrection? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. If only, 100 people went in, maybe. Maybe if 200 people went in and they got further, maybe. I'm not sure where exactly I would, slice the pie to call it, whatever we call it. But wherever we're at, we're way, 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 way over that. And I just.
So here's my thing. Was this done by Trump or was this done by the people? And also, if it was an insurrection, as Destiny and other people in the left for claiming it to be and stuff, then what were the intentions of the people and stuff? Was it, you know, to basically show them that their votes counted, or state that, you know, it was that? And my thing is, who were they going to go ahead and try to get that message out to? Because I could have sworn, like, you know, like with the congressional buildings and stuff, I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't really call that an insurrection right there with what they did. But at the same time, it's like, I don't really know. But apparently under 18 U.S. Code dash 2383, engaging or acting in an insurrection against the United States is a federal crime with penalties including fines, imprisonment, or both and stuff. But now, to this day, 2024, people are still asking what would make that an insurrection. Okay, now people are claiming that, you know, the January 16th debacle attack on the Capitol was cited as an example of an insurrection in contemporary discourse. And they said it involved Trump supporters storming in the Capitol building to disrupt the certification of the 2020 presidential election results, and also led to widespread legal and political repercussions and stuff, with criminal charges and jail time with people who are currently locked up. But there's also still the ongoing debate about, you know, what constitutes an insurrection, particularly in terms of the level of organization, violence, and intent to overthrow the government. And my thing is, what is the intention of those people and stuff on that day without any bias? That's my question that I still want an answer to, but I can't get that from anyone else. You know, now I could have sworn that the term insurrection remains a significant part of political and legal conversations and stuff. And at the same time, there's no viable solution to this particular definition of the answer, except for any answer that you might find on Google. But then again, who controls Google?
I just don't think the comparisons to other more extreme coups or more extreme rebellions or anything in Russia, it just doesn't make any sense. It's only done to equivocate on what's actually happened, or to do a whataboutism to something that I would probably plainly agree with. Like, wouldn't you agree this is a more serious coup or more serious insurrection? Yeah, sure, there can be more serious coups and more serious insurrections. Much the same, there could be more brutal murders of one person and other. It doesn't make one murder not a murder just because you did it easier or did it cleaner.
Okay, so first of all, the reason, as I said at the start, why historical comparisons or historic comparisons to other incidents are so important is because there's a gigantic ideological and partisan motive here in exaggerating the extent to which what happened on January 6th was a serious threat. And especially when somebody is a Democratic Party partisan who goes around saying the Democratic Party is better, we want people to go and vote for Democrats, we want to make sure Donald Trump doesn't return to power, and at the same time the narrative they're pushing coincidentally aligns perfectly with their partisan agenda, then I think it's important to start questioning whether or not there's any authenticity to the beliefs based on how other situations have previously been treated. So let me just make 2 points here about what Donald Trump did. You're actually allowed to summon people to Washington to protest. It's one of the most important rights that the Constitution guarantees. The president is completely free to call his supporters to Washington and to tell them and argue for them that some injustice has been committed and that they ought to protest in response to it. There was one time, and only one time, when Donald Trump addressed the question of whether or not violence should be used when those people went to the Capitol. And what he said was this, quote, "I know that everybody here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard." And the fact that people, because he said peacefully, then have to resort to things like, oh, well, he invoked political cliches like fight like hell. Politicians use fight like hell in almost every speech. Joe Biden, you can read this in the New York Times on December 2nd, said, quote, "I want to make sure we're going to be fighting like hell." You can find pretty much every politician saying that. So that's one thing, is that to the extent you want to say that Donald Trump was somehow involved in this quote-unquote insurrection, the only thing he did was give a constitutionally protected speech, and that is the reason why Jack Smith has not charged him with inciting or participating in an insurrection. It's not my opinion. Obviously, Jack Smith shares the opinion that he could never obtain a conviction. The second thing is, on the numbers, 2,000 people, let's use the maximum number, went into the Capitol. A small percentage, a tiny percentage of people who went into the Capitol actually used violence. So most of those people, the vast majority, according to the US government themselves, were doing nothing other than peacefully protesting. Again, protesters entering the Capitol without authorization, occupying offices of members of Congress in order to pressure them to take some step or not take some step is something that happens all the time. We've seen many more than 2,000 protesters. So don't try and imply that on January 6th, 2,000 armed people or well-trained people intending to commit violence went into the Capitol. The most of that number that you could possibly squeeze out of it is something like 100 or 150, and now we're back way closer to the most ridiculous example that I began by asking you about, where even you said, oh, that probably shouldn't be called an insurrection, than we are to an actual threat to American power or to our system of government, which is necessary to claim in order to turn this into what you want to turn it into.
Boom. Glenn Greenwald just laid Destiny out. And as you walk in here, the clickety-clacks of the keyboards and stuff, that was Destiny right there trying to find some more information, because Destiny is seeing that, oh, snap, my back is up against the wall and everything. I need to go ahead and find some more information about this so that way Destiny, can go ahead and try to prove the Greenwald guy wrong and But yeah, Destiny is basically, you know, seems to me that Destiny actually missed a lot of key information with the president's speech that Glenn Greenwald just shared to Destiny and stuff, as well as to the public out there, of what Trump actually said, where he actually asked people to go ahead and protest peacefully. And Greenwald also told Destiny that it was a small percentage of those 2,000 people supposedly that actually acted violently. Okay, but Destiny wouldn't actually accept that part and stuff. And also, he actually shared with Destiny how he actually corrected himself by saying that, you know, should be sure to call it an insurrection and stuff by the definition that Destiny gave. So yeah, Destiny in a nutshell doesn't know what he's talking about once again, and he got slaughtered by Glenn Greenwald. So let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below. Also, be sure to include any additional thoughts you might have on this particular topic. If you enjoy what was shared in this video, go ahead and smash the like button, share the video far wide across social media. And if you haven't done so already, you enjoyed all the content that I put out there, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Click the bell notification so that way you're notified of future uploads and updates. Till then, peace.